to be talking around blockchain adoption in enterprises. So I think we've heard a lot about a fair amount of blockchain content at this conference. And today we have Mr. Laurent Dedenis, who is Dedenis, c'est français, who is the CEO of Chainstack. You guys are based in Singapore, doing great work with blockchain as a service. Also have Dr. Ratu Saha, who is a computer science PhD out of NUS. I know you're doing some really interesting things with zero knowledge. We'll try and talk about how that can be bridged in enterprises in some of your work. But Laurent, I'd like to start with you. Tell us a little bit about Chainstack. What do you guys do?
So, all right. Chainstack is a platform as a service. We basically enable developers and partners to come and build, deploy, manage, and orchestrate networks. We work mostly within the private permission blockchain space. So most of the customer and partners we're talking to are large enterprise and large partners that basically use Chainstack infrastructure to make it easy for them to build smart contracts and decentralized services. We are cloud agnostic, so we deploy on all three public cloud today, and also on-premise. And we are also blockchain protocol agnostic, which give a choice for the enterprise to choose the right protocol for them and the right consensus. And the reason we do this is because we believe the world will be multi-protocol in the same way it is multi-cloud today, right? So we absolutely believe that certain protocol and blockchain protocol and consensus would be better in order to address specific use case and requirements for the enterprise.
So protocol, you mean like Hyperledger versus Ethereum?
That's correct. So we support Hyperledger and Corda and Quorum and Ethereum today, as well as multi-chain.
Ratu, tell us a little bit about what you're working on.
So GrantL is a consultancy company from Singapore that mostly works with not traditional, but new age blockchain companies that works on specific problems like scalability, privacy, and such. We work with a bunch of top blockchain companies all over the world, and now we are focusing ourselves on data privacy in general. So enterprise data privacy and how, one, the companies that are trying to do that, and two, we are also working on how we can use zero knowledge and multi-party computation in general to provide new solutions, new services to financial sector, private IoT sector, and things like that.
So Laurent, I'm really interested in the sort of use cases and the people, the clients who are coming to you. I'm assuming these are consortia or people from certain industries who are looking to do pilots. Maybe tell us a little bit. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot. You don't have to name names, but give us a little bit of the business thinking around how business is thinking around implementing permission chains in their offerings.
So it's a really good question because it's a beginning of a journey, and it's really an interesting journey because it's a new way to collaborate. It's a new way to work with different type of enterprises and partner differently. It's a mindset change in many ways. It's going to be impacting the way people think about data and how they can collaborate and work with this data across enterprise. In this journey, we're probably at the very beginning of the journey. So companies that we see today coming to us are in vast majority very large companies, and they're trying to identify a specific use case, which is very vertical, where they have a pain point where blockchain is really, it's a given, right? I mean, they believe that blockchain can really help them because of the immutability, because of the transparency, because of the single source of truth. They basically believe that this can help them to address a very specific problem, a pain point problem. Now, the way they seem to assemble today is they come with a small group of partners, right? 3, 4, 5 companies. We have not had the opportunity to meet anyone that came with 100 partners and that they want to build a consortium yet. I guess enterprise in some way, in that respect, behave very much like human, right? I mean, it's very difficult to become super good friends with 100 people, right? I mean, arguably Facebook can do this, but are you really super good friend with 100 people on Facebook? So companies are basically assembling in this way. They try to identify the use case, come with a small number of close partners and people they collaborate with, and they validate the use case at the scale of the production, which is they identify all the steps that are going through the different transaction recording blockchain transaction process, and they build an interface and almost kind of a better than a prototype or a pilot, something that works for them. Now that's where we are. And we anticipate that the next step for them is to grow consortiums, right? So instead of having 3-4 members, which is still pretty much contained and centralized,
Whole different universe. You described as a new age blockchain companies. Tell us a little bit about this environment. I imagine it's very experimental.
Yes, so most of the startups we worked with are new age with super smart people doing some new things that people expect not to work out. But for example, companies are trying. So we have been focusing on scalability for some months, and now I've seen different companies are trying radically different shifts in solving scalability. Some are using sharding technologies that are unheard of using in blockchain, and they have successfully implemented things, successfully made things work, had partnerships with big companies to build on them. We have seen things like reputation management systems that are super hard to pull off in a distributed system in general, make it work towards making sure that there is a scalable solution using reputation management without a hard closed source governing body like Hyperledger in general. So there are very different approaches that people are trying. It's a wild out there. It's very risky, both in terms of investment solutions or in technology itself as well. But yeah, but people are progressing no matter what the market says or no matter what the regulatory or the general public's perception is. The building is happening very well. So we are very hopeful about that.
Okay, since we're at IoT Asia, I must ask an IoT question. How do you see the intersection of IoT and blockchain? Do you think blockchain is as many people have said, cybersecurity solution to IoT? Do you think that even is relevant to be talking about? Or can tokenization play a role here? Consensus, trust, all these buzzwords. What is the role of blockchain in IoT?
all right, so that's a very wide question. So I think what's fascinating is that these even though IoT was there, and more visible slightly earlier than blockchain, I think they emerged together, and today they are going to converge simply because of the number of IoT devices that are going to be created. I think I heard one of the speakers prior to my presentation that from Indonesia that was saying that they're probably going to be around 400 million IoT devices in Indonesia this year, right? I think the latest report from IDC that I read talk about 20 billion. So I was thinking if you have 400 million in Indonesia, it's not 20 billion we're going to have worldwide. It's probably 200 billion because the country is obviously only a small part of the world. So I guess the complexity of managing the truth and the traceability and the transparency of all these IoT data is going to come on the table at some point. It's visible with news today around fake news, and tomorrow people will want to make sure that IoT data from your car, IoT data from your plane, IoT data from surrounding some things surrounding us are basically authentic, real, genuine, and no one has basically tampered with it. It will be a matter of security in many ways. And I don't really see how this can actually be achieved, taking into account the amount of the number of parties involved in this process without some automation. And blockchain is not the answer to everything, does not provide a complete solution, but gives you an ability to automate an entire chain of evidence, provenance, which is very important in IoT, in a very, very automated way. So I see those two converging very drastically as a way to provide genuine, secure, and traceable information and provide some immutability. I mean, the immutability in IoT is probably underestimated today because most people view IoT as a point-in-time data. But if you think about it, I think most data will become permanent, even most of the IoT data. People will keep data because you don't know yet what you're going to be able to do with this data a few years from now. And if you think about keeping most of the IoT data, I think today you basically throw away about 90% of the IoT data like within 24 hours. Probably this number can be discussed, but I think you will keep more data for a longer period of time. And again, blockchain will help with that. So I see a complete convergence in the way it can be automated for a very low cost, which ultimately is what people will be looking for.
Ratul, any thoughts? Convergence?
I would actually disagree on certain of the points. Like I agree on your the general purpose, like you said, the automation and blockchain will come together to have more data in general. But with 26 billion devices coming out, first there's a very good less chance that we will be able to store all the data because data in blockchain is costly in general. That's number one. Number two, most of the blockchain solutions right now or coming out cannot do IoT at all because that's mostly because doing IoT requires much less compute power, much less energy, and much less load on the system, which most of the blockchain nodes can't be. So they always resort back to having bunch of central servers, and those central servers managing the IoT devices, and those central servers actually making the blockchain itself. So it's not necessarily exactly ubiquitous IoT implementation in blockchain in general. So to be honest, in recent times there's a very low chance of using a wide scale IoT implementation using a blockchain, no matter even if your blockchain has IoT in it, the name of it. But what will happen instead is we'll see gradually implementations. We will see, as you said, some more automations being enabled, more data permanency being enabled by blockchain. And I would also like to see that more IoT deployments being comfortable about throwing our data because they know it's not about revealing, keeping the data, especially enterprise sensitive data like we do right now, like keep everything and we'll see how it will use it later, but about using that data to automate each other and use that to do real world examples, real world use cases instead of having analytics and apps in general. So that makes sense.
Ratul, you work on something called zero knowledge. I just want to bring this out, flesh this out. It's very interesting. Tell us what zero knowledge is and what's the promise of zero knowledge. Proofs.
All right. So in very generic form, so this is a very academic thing that has been happening since 80s and 80s, 90s. And now people have been saying, after blockchain has come, people have saying that now we need a solution to mask these blockchain transactions. We want to not show the exact transaction value, the sender and the receiver. And then they sort of dig out the papers and saw, okay, this is an area that have an application in blockchain where we should be able to prove a blockchain transaction without revealing the transaction. And this is just one part of application of zero knowledge in general, but if we dig a bit deeper, the real zero knowledge is about two parties. It can be two IoT devices, it can be two enterprises which hold certain data, and they want to do certain computation on the data. They want to, maybe the simplest cases, they want to match those two data points. Maybe two IoT devices wants to match their manufacturer name. That without revealing the data itself. So there is a notion of privacy first design, is that you want to make sure that the data you generate out of, it can be your own company, it can be a device, it can be anything else, but the data you generate should not have to leave and go to a central thing, should not have to go across another enterprise just for verification. Instead, you should be able to use that data, do some computation, and maybe forget about it, or more importantly, keep the data inside of you. So in today's world, previously we used to think data as assets. And in last few years, we have also seen data as liabilities. And with GDPR and new protection bills coming in and people being more aware of their own data, data is also a liability as well as an asset. So this is where zero knowledge will play a crucial role to making data privacy, both enterprise and user, a crucial thing.
I just like to add to that, which is really a very interesting topic. So our team at Chainstack worked on a couple of zero knowledge proof projects together with ZDB and a few A-Star a couple of years ago, and that's clearly something that could help with a lot of the automation and processing. I think and by the way, Chainstack is part of a very interesting consortium which is called Zero Trust Consortium, ZTC, which will basically provide a way for people to anchor into a secure chain some particular set of data and information. And you're going to find a lot of these consortiums, probably industry-based, where independent, in the same way today you have some independent parties, right? Some blockchain and some protocol will probably specialize and verticalize into this. So Zero Trust Consortium is interesting. You can check their website. You'll have others. I think what's interesting in this is, going back to the previous question, is I really view blockchain as a way to anchor some data, not all data. And you're right, no one is going to store IoT data on some blockchain anytime soon, because that's going to be very slow. It's going to be very expensive and probably not very useful. But what you want to record, and from a transaction standpoint, is basically the tool or the set of data that basically, the part of the data that enables you to prove the genuine and the traceability within the chain. So that's kind of an interesting concept. So it's kind of blockchain as a way to anchor data and prove that this data comes from here or is moving there, or this set of data should be shared in this way or recorded in this way. So I think we kind of agree on this. And Zero Trust is going to be fascinating because it will open opportunities for people to share very, very confidential set of information, but only selected part of this information to selected parties. Amazing concept.
Wonderful. Any questions from the audience? Otherwise, where can people find out about your work and Chainstack, your website? There's a white paper out there.
So chainstack.com.
With that, please join me in thanking the panel.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Take a picture.